Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, we're not Andres Duani and Ms. Peter Zyberg, although we're often mistaken for them.
All right. So I'm Galina Tachieva, managing partner at DPZ Co-Design, and this is Senen Antonio, who is a partner at DPZ. So we are very excited to be here today and also very honored to present at the World Architecture Festival. It is really an interesting presentation, which most of it will be presented by Senen, but I just wanted to say a few words about our company. We are an architectural and urban design company. Most of our practice is centered on urban design, making neighborhoods, towns, villages, resorts, sometimes even cities, and also urban master plans and regional plans. So Andres Duani and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg are our founding partners, as Paul mentioned, and they have been traveling, so they couldn't be here today, but they're still very active in our practice. They have been writing, creating, thinking, and when you have your founding partners around, usually you feel very young. However, Senen and I, we're not that young. We have been at DPZ for more than half a century, actually. We counted. I have been with the company 32 years, and he was 21 years, so it's really a long time. So we have a lot of experience together. And we wanted to present to you today some of the principles which we have been talking about and we have been working with for all these years. We also have a little kind of mantra that whatever we do it with a big goal to create not only sustainable, resilient communities which will be around for decades, but also to contribute to to the human happiness in general. We are very, very happy when we go to some of our build projects and we see children and old people together, multi-generational kind of communication, and people seem really happy. So this is a very central point. So the good thing is that some of these principles, which are about 8 in number, all of them we decided to kind of assemble them in a way which is easy to remember, and also for a good reference. All of them actually begin with a C. So we will present this to you a little later. But the one against which our movement and our practice has been formed was the so-called sprawl. These are these communities which are very much car-oriented, car-dependent. And what we try to do is almost the opposite, plus not the a kind of dependence on the cars. We accommodate the cars, but we try these places not to be dependent. These are usually the description for sprawl. They are single use. There is disproportionate use of resources, land, etc., pollution, a lot of commuting. These are the features which, unfortunately, here from the United States, we have exported all around the world. So we go now to the 8 so-called Cs, the 8 Cs of sustainable resilient communities, and Senen will talk about those compact, complex, complete, connected, convivial, conserving, cost-effective, and co-designed communities. And this is why DPZ, our kind of logo is DPZ Co-Design, because we always co-design with our clients and our consultants and the municipalities, towns where we go.
All right, very good. Yeah. Thank you, Galina. So let's just dive right into the C's. So the first C is compact. And that concerns communities that are efficient and make equitable use of their land area. Here is a series of images about the sprawl growth, or describing the sprawl growth in the typical American city. Even Charleston, one of the most beloved cities in the US, if not the world, has also experienced its share of sprawl. Interesting to note that 80% of everything that was built in North America was built in the last 70 to 90 years. And of course, we've exported this model across the world as well. Again, this is just a series of images. Sorry about the miscaption at the top, but also showing you how much sprawl has spread out, literally spread out across the planet. So what we, in contrast, advocate is a return to compact development, specifically as defined under smart growth. We want to return to the increment of the neighborhood as the building block for our communities, cities, towns, villages. And as defined under smart growth, a neighborhood comprises approximately about 125 acres, 50 hectares, which is the area covered by this conceptual circle with quarter-mile radius or 400-meter radius. That's been typically determined to be the maximum distance or a comfortable distance a person will walk for his or her basic daily needs before getting into a car. And of course, across the world, you can calibrate that, or it should be calibrated to the social-cultural specificities of a society. Some societies walk 10 minutes, some societies walk 15 minutes. Especially during the pandemic, the 15-minute city concept was a simple enough concept that gained a lot of traction, especially as people were hunkering down at home, where direct, walkable, bikeable access to services, goods, and even socialization was the norm, if not actually mandated. By planning for complete neighborhoods, even a large town can comprise a series of smaller, distinct, and somewhat self-sufficient neighborhoods that more closely fit the natural patterns of human settlement. This is a master plan that DPZ did. I'm not sure if the cursor is showing up, but on the left side, you see the master plan that DPZ completed for a town called Chapelton. Actually, it's closer to the size of a small city, just outside of Aberdeen. And you can see the plan is organized into these circles, or neighborhoods. They represent neighborhoods with clearly defined centers. And then this larger circle here is sort of like the 10-minute pedestrian shed for the center of the new town. And all of these are linked by transit, which then latches on to the regional transportation network that you see on the right. Let's see, it won't fit. Okay. So, by doing so, citizens will have equitable access to their basic daily needs without needing an automobile. And again, this was very much experienced or daylit during the pandemic. This is a screenshot of an article of what Manila went through during the pandemic, where the most necessary essential workers were the most disenfranchised because they couldn't get to their places of work, to places of service. They had to travel 2-3 hours, sometimes walking to their places of service, when they, in fact, were the ones needing the most direct access. The next C is complex, which concerns mainly housing for a diversity of age, income, and lifestyle preference. Here is an edited Google Earth image of DPZ's Norton Commons, as it's shown surrounded by sprawl. Hopefully you can distinguish which one is the traditional neighborhood development, or TND, and which is the sprawl development. Norton Commons, obviously the one on the right, is immediately read as a traditional town with a sense of place created by a mix of buildings and uses. And here's a close-up of that. Suburban development on the right is, kind of the same on the left, it's kind of the same 300 square meter house, potato stamped over and over again on this curlicue network of streets. Norton Commons, the image on the right, offers live-work units, apartment villas, medium-sized houses, large houses, ADUs, or ancillary dwelling units, all within a vibrant town structure. The variety in housing options helps bring a wider range of people to the center of services as well. In this case, the town center is actually just off the image right there. Andres Duani himself has said, a few times, if you're selling privacy, every new house that you build in a community or in a city is a break of that promise. But if you're selling community, every new building that you build helps fulfill that promise. During the pandemic, some urban theorists had said that the new normal would see cities and urban centers losing favor, and we did see that. The top-tier cities lost their luster and glamour and popularity. They took a powerful hit to their reputations, especially as being centers of culture and art. And we did see a large exodus to the suburbs. That being said, these same experts said that the suburbs will probably rise again in their popularity. People will settle in the suburbs. The cities will die. But what we see actually is more of an evening out. And this evening out has actually raised has made us more aware of this discrepancy or gap in the type of urban patterns that we're building across the world, mainly the missing middle, which is the dark gray here. Not necessarily the suburbs, not necessarily as dense as the city, but has a gentle density with enough critical mass that services can work effectively and cost efficiently. The next C concerns complete, which deals with jobs housing balance, balance with retail use, with schools, and with programmed open space. In sprawl, places sprawl places are monocultures. That is, places where people only places where people only live, places where people only work. And you can see here this very dated business park. The urban environment is so oppressive and so mundane that the engineers, or maybe the landscape architect, thought it would be made more interesting if the sidewalk wiggled, And places where people only shop. This is Florida Mall, not that far from where we are today, at least as far as car driving goes, right? Interesting fact, Business Insider in October 2022 stated that only 700 malls remain in the United States, and only 150 are projected to remain in the next 10 years. And then in April last year, analysts at UBS projected that 40,000 to 50,000 American retail stores would shut down in the next couple of years. So what to do with all these potentially stranded built assets? And that's something that my fellow partner Galina Tachieva has been dealing with over the last 15 years, developing strategies for how to repurpose these commercial assets. T&Ds are much denser than their conventional suburban counterparts, which is a key aspect to their walkability. This is the main street in DPZ's Rosemary Beach in the Florida Panhandle. And you can see here, greater densities create the proximate customer catchment needed to support these neighborhood businesses and community amenities, furthering the walkability. So you can see just within this image alone, just within this 5-minute walk, as it were, you have market, you have offices, shops, live-work units, 2 types of hotels, a restaurant, multiple types of open spaces, and even a school and a bank, all within walking distance of the residential development surrounding it. And apart from offering a diverse range of residences and commercial uses, T&Ds also offer a diverse range of workplaces. Again, back to the Florida Panhandle, the 4 traditional neighborhood developments, or T&Ds, that you'll find there, Seaside, Rosemary Beach, Alice Beach, Watercolor, together in total, they maintain an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 jobs. In places for both to shop for necessities and amenities, in places of entertainment and leisure, in the school, and in small businesses. The next C concerns connected, which deals with walkability, bikeability, transit readiness, permeability, and proximity. Many of you are familiar with this type of land use plan. Sprawl is the product of the rise of car use and segregated land use zoning. The commercial in bright red is separated from the high density residential in orange, is separated from the medium density residential in yellow, and separated from the low density residential in light yellow. Accepting the pandemic, each year, the average American spends 55 8-hour work days in the car. Imagine that, 55 8-hour, that's 2 months. 2 months Americans are spending driving. That could be a vacation, a really nice vacation. That could be a short course that you could take to further your employability. That could be time that you spend writing the next great American novel, or finishing your painting, or finishing that furniture, piece of furniture that you're building in your garage. A lot of time spent, useless time spent in the car. Well, the advocates of sustainable and resilient development say that there is no planet B, though some scientists might argue that we're actually very close to colonizing Mars. Well, we crunched the numbers, and with the volume of traffic on many major highways, we could actually reach Mars in a week with the amount of driving that we do. At least this is for Palmetto Expressway, which is, again, here in Miami. Traffic engineers continually add lanes and raise speed limits, mistakenly thinking that doing so would alleviate the traffic. Well, many studies have proven that to be false, largely due to the economic principle of induced demand. The more capacity you add, the more people will actually avail of that capacity and worsen the situation. There are many studies on this. You can look that up on your own. Here's a pair of interesting slides, at least to me. Hopefully you'll find it interesting as well. This is a literal screen cap from Google Maps. This is in Central Florida, north of us. So let's take, sorry, how do I go back? Let's take 2 residents, one living in 13442 Summer Rain Drive, and the other living in 1591 Anna Catherine Drive. Their houses share the same rear wall. But if, let's say, Summer wanted to visit Anna, according to Google Maps, she would have to drive about half an hour to visit her friend. And if she decided to walk, Google Maps tells us that it'll take her over 2 hours for these 2 friends to see each other. It would be so much more practical, so much better if they just tore down the back wall, or at least put a gate, right, that they can visit each other, or maybe just talk to each other over the fence in the back of their properties. Vehicle miles traveled, or VMTs, in conventional sprawl can be anywhere from 1/3 to 1.5 times higher than in traditional neighborhood developments, or TNDs. An average suburban household generates about 8 to 11 car trips per day, compared to a household in a location-efficient community, or a TND, which brings down the household trips to about 2 to 3 car trips per day. And by the way, what's interesting about this diagram is the elements are the same. Even the number and the footprints are the same. What really matters is design, urban design and planning. The way the elements are arranged make the difference. In TNDs, streets are designed for humans first before cars. They're narrower. The buildings come and form a public room. Sometimes even the buildings themselves hang over the thoroughfare section. And that encourages, of course, walkability and biking, which is, of course, geared especially for those who are typically disenfranchised by our sprawl developments, namely the very young, who cannot yet drive, or the very old, for whom it's difficult, if not dangerous, to drive, and in some communities as well, those who cannot afford to drive, the lower income bracket segments of our society. Another interesting fact, the average suburban adult is about 6 pounds heavier than their counterparts that live in walkable neighborhoods. When we design our communities in this fashion, when we're conscious about the public realm, how we design the public realm, specifically our streets, counting our streets as part of public open space, we create a much more pedestrian-friendly ground floor environment, providing outdoor space and for restaurants and retail to spread out, and just create a better streetscape and urbscape overall. And in addition to typical streets, TNDs, or traditional neighbor developments, can also feature alternate networks or means for getting around, such as pedestrian paths, lanes, and alleys. These are practical alternate routes for navigating a community. And this is our fellow partner, Matt Lambert, with his free-range daughter, Amelia. And Amelia's walking him. He's not walking Amelia, Amelia's walking him. This is in Rosemary Beach, which is also well known for its many pedestrian paths. The next C is convivial, concerning public spaces that are safe, engaging, and accessible. In sprawl, we will find a lot of what we call slopes. Not slopes as they concern topography, but slopes, which is an acronym SLOAPS. What does that stand for? Space left over after planning. So in most other places, especially where there's maybe a less than careful engineer or architect or planner, they will lay out a site plan or a master plan, drop in the buildings, drop in the roads, drop in the parking, and then everything else that's left on the site, they just color green. And that's open space. But more often than not, these ersatz open spaces are hardly usable. They're, again, leftover space, they're dribbly, they're uninhabitable, and they just don't mean anything to the community. They don't contribute to the urban fabric. What we advocate is the mindful assemblage of open space in the form of nature preserves, parks, greens, squares, plazas, and gardens at a variety of sizes and types. Here at Seaside, again, one of DPZ's earliest communities, you have the central green, a large central green that is sort of like the iconic gathering space for the community. You have a green quad or quadrangle associated with the school or the lyceum. You have a pocket park here lined with liveworks. You have a tree-lined boulevard. You have smaller pockets parks here in the corners. And then, of course, beach walks taking you down to the coast. Open space doesn't have to be large. They can be very intimate. This is one of my favorite open spaces. This is Paley Park in Manhattan. Squished between two skyscrapers, but very, very popular among New Yorkers. And open space doesn't have to be green. They can be paved. This is Sturget in Copenhagen, one of the first streets to be reestablished as a pedestrian space after being overtaken by cars for so many years. And open spaces can be opportunistic or placeholders. This is, or was, what was called Wynwood Yard, which was a large empty lot owned by a developer, in fact, in Wynwood, but leased by a very entrepreneurial developer and restaurateur who populated it with food trucks, with container stores. She put down AstroTurf and gravel, again, just as a temporary means for a surface for people to gather and enjoy. And it was very successful for many years until the time was right for the site to be developed. So again, and it was a very, very popular anchor in Miami, not just for Wynwood itself, but it drew from all over Metro Miami. And by investing in civic design, you can consider that as investing in the creation of a civil society. Pedra Branca, another DPZ plan, in fact, led by Galina in Brazil, the central gathering space in that community has become a great social condenser where people from all walks of life come together, not just from Pedra Branca itself, but also drawing from the region, coming together into this community or civic space. We're heading to the last stretch. The next C is conserving, which deals with communities that are resource efficient, that are healthy, and are thus durable and flexible. From an environmental standpoint, the loss of natural habitat and natural areas for recreation, or even ag use, is one of the greatest issues that we face as a society, as a global society, as a low-density car development has overtaken our landscapes, our urban, natural and urban landscapes. Towns built with traditional patterns with moderate densities and the mix of land uses have much smaller development footprint. As you can see here, it's almost a third of what would have been taken over by sprawl. And even the infrastructure is greatly reduced. If development is necessary, TNDs offer a way to more explicitly integrate existing natural features of the site. This is an image of Habersham, a DPZ community in South Carolina, Beaufort County. The mature vegetations and wetlands on the site were preserved and incorporated into the master plan for parks, common areas, and even natural drainage basins. And residents were given direct access to these amenities as well. Here's another picture of Habersham. We mapped out the trees very, very carefully. There were a lot of mature trees on the site, and where they intersected with the plan, as it were, we worked with the engineers and the developers to actually integrate the mature trees. So like this road, the street, winds around the tree, and the residents love it because we preserve the natural character of the site. Resilient communities also integrate the community's open space network with the larger regional framework. This is a photo of the 22-acre nature preserve at the north part of Alice Beach, DPZ's Alice Beach, also in the Panhandle, where you see this boardwalk extending over the preserve and connecting to the larger regional framework, the larger regional park system. On the topic of architectural style, while traditional neighborhood development does not promote a specific style per se, we do advocate a certain responsibility towards contextual, climatic responsive design, indigenous forms and materials. Here's two houses south of Manila, where I grew up. The house on the left is in a community, a suburban development called Chateau de Paris. Mind you, the Philippines was never a colony of France, so I don't know where we got or how this developer got that DNA. I don't know what that turret is for. Maybe it's for storing the broom or the vacuum cleaner, or maybe for pouring hot oil on the surging hordes. I don't know. But also notice that the windows, this preoccupation with a cartoon style and sticking to it almost dangerously, the small narrow windows will definitely require, will incur a higher energy cost for lighting and for ventilation. So this kind of house ultimately is a very expensive kind of house for the residents. Compare that with the house on the right, which is a few kilometers away in a community that is more designed with sort of like this tropical vernacular aesthetic. Again, the wider roof eaves, the larger windows, actually windows that can be slid back and forth, opened up, closed up, much more climatically responsive, at least in the context of the Philippines or any tropical environment. So, again, with the idea that it does need to be calibrated to the specific place where a city or a community is located, we would like to see much more careful thought in determining the architectural style of any building or a set of buildings that go into our community. And here is a McMansion, a house that is trying to be an entire village on its own. There are at least 21 gables and ridges. There are at least 10 window types. By the way, none of you in this room designed this house, I hope. There are 10 window types on the front elevation alone. Imagine the door and window schedule for this house. Everything is internalized. The external environment in the type of community that this type of house is in, essentially suburban sprawl. Suburban sprawl is so awful and driving to other places has become so tedious that all the third places, the places between home and work, home being the first place, work being the second place, the third place is the places where you shop, where you recreate, where you experience culture. They've become so difficult and inaccessible that many suburban developments now try to internalize those third places inside a single family house. Again, another stat, the average size of a North American suburban house in 1949, 900 square feet. 2021, 2,500 square feet. So the jump has just been so ridiculously exponential. Who knows what it'd be in the next 10 to 30 years. Okay. At the building scale, conserving strategies, again, talking about a tropical context here in Miami, actually comprise many design techniques that used to be more common than they are today. I'll go through these very quickly, we're running out of time. For example, we recommend high-pitched roofs to draw heat away from the living spaces below. Cross-ventilation of rooms, again, as another example, inducing natural light and cross-ventilation. Optimizing albedo, which is the measurement of solar reflectivity on a material surface, building with lighter materials, especially as global warming becomes even more pronounced. Building with lighter materials helps reduce energy costs and keeps houses and other buildings cooler in a more natural fashion. These are some of DPZ's other initiatives concerning conservation and techniques for sustainable development specific to certain themes, whether it's agricultural urbanism, light imprint development, or sprawl repair, which Galina leads. Cost effective. TNDs typically cost 50 to 60% less than sprawl. So this means, for example, for a city, that the city has more discretionary spending money, whether to spend on arts and culture, civic facilities, public transportation, geotagging for material supply management, etc. Smart growth and development generates 10% times more tax revenue than conventional suburban development. And of course, there are other metrics as well, non-economic, non-numeric based metrics. One of the most famous proponents of this, of course, is Mayor Enrique Peñalosa with his movement to promote happy cities. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped that slide. It's this slide, I'm sorry. And last but not least, co-designed. When communities are co-designed, all the different decision makers come together to form a plan that has support from the entire community, not just the decision makers, not just the designers, but the community coming together to fulfill a large, broad-based vision. And I guess, those are the 8 C's. Again, compact, complex, complete, connected, convivial, conserving, cost-effective, and co-designed. And if we might add one more C, at least for our practice, coffee-fueled. It's a very big part of our office culture. And if you do happen to have a few extra days, some extra time here in Miami, Galina and I would like to invite you to visit us at our office in Little Havana and maybe break bread and chat over a cafecito or two. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I have visited your office, and the whole new urbanism thing, there you were signatory, early signatories on the charter for it. And, there's photographs of the Prince of Wales and everything. And in a way, I mean, coming to Miami and hearing what you're talking about is a far cry from the kind of arguments that took place in London and elsewhere about this, philosophical battle between new urbanists as represented by the Prince of Wales, which was probably unfortunate because the way you presented this doesn't have to be royal. It can be what you described. And what I'm wondering is whether that battle that started up, which got quite vicious at times, whether everybody calmed down, and whether there's peaceful coexistence, or is there still a battle going on because you're still fighting traffic and you're still fighting sprawl. How do you see the way that things have turned out so far? Galina?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I remember that 20 or 30 years ago, it was really a battle about doing communities which are more mixed use, with less dependence on the car and all of these things. Wherever we went, it was, we cannot live without our cars, don't make our roads more pedestrian friendly, all of that. Recently, actually, it's a lesser battle, because people understand that walkable communities are healthier, and also not only that they're healthier, but they're more cost efficient, and people pay more for them. I think that this was probably one of the most persuading ways of people seeing that, like, for example, this project which Senen showed, a little piece of, the suburbia and the other next door, per square foot, it's just the T&D sells much higher, because people like community and community design. Of course, the share of the market which goes to just, they enjoy pure suburbia and they like long drives and all of that, will not disappear. We have plenty of that, but the proportion in the market for these types of communities is really growing, and has been growing a lot. Also, another thing that is that this conversation has been also happening not only in suburbia, for greenfield development, but also in our cities. And sometimes, and maybe from the presentation which you saw, the impression may be that we do only these greenfield, kind of lower density communities, neighborhoods, and villages and resorts. We do a lot of urban work. Like, for example, here in Miami, I don't know how many of you have been around, but Miami, the city of Miami, has been under a code which was created in our office, by our office 15 years ago, the so-called Miami 21, which actually made Miami more walkable, with better shaped, more kind of friendly streets. There is a lot of more mixed use. So some of this recent growth is, of course, the market and the prosperity and all of that, but it's also because we had a very good form-based, the so-called form-based code, which is one of the codes for one of the largest city in the country.
I'd like to add to that also, Paul, especially in the context of Europe or the UK. I think the bad response that the architectural community in the UK had to the King, now the King, then the Prince of Wales, and also new urbanism, was a perception, maybe a misperception, that what was being promoted was a throwback, a curtailing of creative impulse, that it was tying the architects' creative juices, or curtailing their juices, and reverting to something old-fashioned,
nostalgic.
But Andres and I had this discussion in the broader sense, in terms of, say, for example, introducing agrarian urbanism back in our communities. He said you cannot do that when a society is, say, 1 or 2 generations removed from it, because they still remember the difficulty of living that way. So I would imagine maybe the part of the response, the poor response, was they could, those who opposed it could only see themselves living in an old house, when in fact what we're advocating is a blend, taking maybe traditional forms but bringing them into the 21st century with modern amenities, modern features. Of course, as Galina said, adding walkability and a beautiful, enriched public realm makes the difference.
There's a curious thing, as I was looking at some of those images, I'm thinking, well, what you're doing, you're rejecting the great icons of America. You're rejecting the car. You're rejecting the mail. You're rejecting this and that. And so this is anti-American. And then I thought, no, it's not anti-American. It's un-American. And then I thought about McCarthyism. You can't say it's un-American because that sounds like something completely different. So what I arrived at was actually, it all looks rather European, but with sort of different architecture. And I wonder whether, the extent to which your models of idealized communities, come straight out of, the European urban tradition.
Well, to high extent, yes. However, there are many traditional, wonderful, beautiful towns and cities from where we could take direct inspiration.
American cities.
American cities. I come from Europe, for example, and many of we are a very international office, and we have many people, from Europe, and also the American cities, the ones which we really revere and which are some of the most beloved in America, like whether it's the Savannas or the, Boston or Charleston or Key West. They have the DNA of walkable, beautiful, maybe not European, because the European have the medieval charm, let's say the Italian, French, whatever. But here in America, it's a kind of the simple grid, and nevertheless, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
They have building types which are different from the European. Like, for example, the porch is a very American invention, and things like that. So we try to be context sensitive. For example, the projects which we do in Great Britain, we have a few projects which are under construction in Scotland. It was a lot of fun reinventing the Scottish vernacular for the Scottish people. We were like, why are you doing these houses which are suburban American houses? We went in Inverness, and there was a building type called Miami.
The Miami.
And we were like, what are you doing? Look at your beautiful Scottish villages. And we went on this amazing tour, and we basically were, sketching and measuring, and it was a wonderful experience. And then when we interpreted this DNA for contemporary living, people love it. It's cheaper, it's more sustainable, it creates a neighborhood in a million different ways from which we learned actually literally in the Scottish countryside, discovering amazing relationship between countryside and urbanism, the amazing things, not to even mention London and Edinburgh, and it's a lot of inspirations in Great Britain.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, because I had no idea there was a house type called Miami in Scotland. Yesterday actually, after Bernardo Fort-Brescia spoke, I asked him this question about whether, when they were working overseas, whether they thought they were taking Miami. Then he said absolutely not. You had to
context,
find what you found in context. And on the other hand, I thought to myself, well, I could do with a touch of Miami in certain cities in England, basically just to cheer them up.
Yes.
But that's a lovely story to end on. Thank you so much for your presentation, Galina Tachieva and Senen Antonio. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Paul.
much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.